These are the 4 parts of the citizenship interview. Let's start with speaking and listening. Speaking and listening includes a couple of different segments, all of which are designed to help the officer find out if the applicant's English is good enough to become a citizen. First, conversation questions. The officer might ask, "How is the weather? How was your drive? How long was your drive? Did anyone come with you today?" They might ask, "Why do you want to be a U.S. citizen?" Or, "How did you become a legal permanent resident?" They will also use some commands like, "Please come into my office. Please remain standing and raise your right hand." They will have the applicant take an oath. The officer will say, "Do you swear or affirm that the statements that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" The applicant needs to say, "I do," or "yes." Then the officer might ask, "Well, what did you just promise?" And then the applicant could say, "I promise to tell the truth." There'll be additional commands like, "Okay, now please have a seat. Please hand me your green card," or "Please hand me your state-issued identification." The officer will also evaluate the applicant's ability to speak and listen in English by going through their N400 application for naturalization. This application is 20 pages long. The officer needs to go through it because they need to verify that all the information is correct. They're trying to make sure that everything's accurate, but they're also using that oral questioning from the application form to evaluate the applicant's speaking and listening in English. So there's technically 12 parts that they'll be going through in their N400, but really about half of it is parts 1 through 11, and the other half is part 12. So first, let's look at parts 1 through 11. This will be information about the applicant, such as when and where were they born, their current address, prior or previous addresses, questions about their family, are their parents citizens, questions about their children's ages, their names, where they were born and when they were born, questions about their spouse, employment, any schools that they've attended while they've been in the United States, and any travel in the last 5 years outside of the United States. The second half of that segment is part 12, and these are yes or no questions. A lot of these questions use the phrase, "Have you ever?" Have you ever registered to vote in the United States, been a member of a group, been part of a police unit or a paramilitary unit, a military unit, a guerrilla group, a vigilante group? Have you ever used weapons? Have you ever been arrested, convicted? There's all sorts of questions that sort of fall under the issue of have you ever been involved in any crimes? Have you ever smuggled illegal substances, or been a prostitute, or been involved in genocide or torture? There are some questions related to interactions you might have had through ICE, like have you ever been deported or been in proceedings for deportation or removal or exclusion? And then there are questions that are related to what you're going to promise when you take your oath of allegiance. Are you willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States if required by law? Are you willing to help in a national emergency if required by law? Do you support the Constitution and form of government? Are you willing to take the oath of allegiance? So that gives you a sense of the types of questions in part 12. Now let's look at the reading test. USCIS provides a list of the words that they use to make up the sentences on the reading test. Applicants have to read one sentence correctly. They will have up to 3 chances of, if they don't read the first sentence, they will be given a second different sentence, and then again a third different sentence. They do not have to read it exactly, but it has to be close. The officer will say, read this sentence. It will be in the form of a question. The applicant will read the question out loud. They will not answer the question. So, for example, the officer would point the applicant to a tablet that is in front of the applicant. The officer will say, read this sentence. And there will be a sentence on the tablet in the form of a question. The applicant will read that out loud. So the applicant in this case would say, who was George Washington? And that applicant would pass. For the writing test, again, USCIS provides a list of words that they use to make up the writing test sentences. The applicant will have to write one sentence. Again, there can be some mistakes, but they have to be limited mistakes. The officer gets to make the judgment call as to whether the applicant has passed. The applicant, again, will have 3 chances to write a sentence correctly. The officer will say, write this sentence. The officer will say a sentence, and then the applicant will write that sentence. So, for example, the officer might say, write this sentence. Washington was the first president. And on the tablet, the applicant now needs to write, Washington was the first president. Finally, we have the civics questions. There are 100 questions about government, history, geography, and American symbols that the students need to learn. They will be asked up to 10 of those questions, and they have to answer 6 of the questions correctly. USCIS provides an answer bank of the correct answers that they prefer that applicants learn. And that's it. Those are the 4 parts of the naturalization interview.